So I was asked to do a Dharma talk, pulled out of the bullpen at the last minute. So please forgive me if it's a little short. But I spend a lot of time thinking about what it means to attain nothing. However, it seems as if everything I do, most thoughts and actions that I perform, are in an effort to attain something. I am ashamed to say it, but many of my actions are intended to achieve or attain. That attainment could just be beating another car to the next stoplight. It can be believing that I am somehow smarter, better, stronger than someone else. Even sitting on the cushion, I believe that Zazen would help me attain mental stability and fortitude. When I first started sitting, I thought that meditation made me interesting, possibly attractive, intelligent, complicated. And that is why I sat at first. I really thought I was getting something for nothing, so to speak. Um, all these years later, I keep coming back to a section of the Heart Sutra that resonates with me, the words, with nothing to attain. But with nothing to attain, the Bodhisattva relies on prajna paramita, or perfection, perfection of the self, perfection of the heart. And at this point, I am always, well, I'm confronted with trying to rationalize emptiness and nothingness. Why would I sit to attain nothing? I ask myself. Then I come to who is it that sits? I tell myself that there is no I. There is no one sitting. But it takes me a long time to figure that out. In order to use my rational mind to figure that out, I have to mentally negate all body sensations, emotion, and language, as these are ingredients my mind uses to make concepts. The idea that I exist is a concept. The idea that I do not exist is similarly a concept that is also an innate reality. This is a lot to back into. I find myself deconstructing myself all the time. Sometimes I never get past the first step. What gets in the way is that my small mind has many justifications for existing and proving that it is a tangible entity. My small self aspires to be more than just the conceptual I. And if this I, this realized self, is to exist, it has to attain to substantiate its existence. It has to be more than, better than, different than, to be an I, to be an individual, to be a separate self. I have to achieve and attain to be an individual. It takes constant effort and thought to manifest this dualism with everything around me. Yes, it takes a lot of meaningless thought to construct, maintain, and administrate the self. A former Zen teacher would often say to me, you are being used by something. That's true. I am being used by something constantly, unconsciously, and unwillingly, and yet the majority of my life is spent in this delusion. This projected reality that I call me tells me that emptiness is form by believing that my thoughts are real, making me think that I can achieve and attain without moving or doing anything. Only through using my thoughts to elevate myself, differentiate myself, judge myself, and constantly construct myself. This I, this constructed self, requires constant validation. Attainment is a validation of the self, and what is attained must be held on to through clinging and attachment. I cling to what I know and what I think I know just to be right. I am attached to the story of my history and my projected future. If I was to stop clinging, then who would I be? Nothing? Nothing with nothing to attain? No delusion? Only perfection? Only perfection of the heart? The Heart Sutra goes on to say that with no hindrances, no fears exist. Deep within the machinations of my mind, I believe that there is a connection between Zazen and the extinction of fear. Foolishly thinking that I can manifest fearlessness through Zazen. Mistakenly thinking that fearlessness can be created through attaining or achievement when it arises from the absence of attainment. This paradox is hard for my rational mind to absorb. Many years ago, I attended a seminar where there was a combination of Zazen and a technique for rational negation of the small mind. The intention was to give students who have had a limited amount of cushion time a Satori experience, an opening that they could use as a platform to expand their practice. After reflecting on this for many years, I can say that using rationalization and negation to create an opening in the mind is sort of like comparing actual sex to watching sex on TV. And that's another aphorism from a former Zen teacher. So, as there's really no comparison. You cannot rationalize dropping away body and mind. We can talk ourselves out of the idea that you are yourself and that there is no fixed self, but you cannot create emptiness through thought. Emptiness arises through an absence of thought. With no thought, there is nothing to attain. And without any hindrances, no fears exist. Jane once said, fearlessness comes from releasing the things that tie us to ideas and goals and prevent the maturation of true being. The more I think of that statement, my immaturity becomes self-evident. I can definitively say that spending time thinking about attaining nothing is actually attaining nothing.
Thank you, Spencer. Do we have any comments or questions for him?
I'm sure you must have many. Don't let him off so easy.
Yeah. Don't let him think he talked you out of asking questions. That's the Yes, Matt.
Yeah. Thank you for the talk, Spencer. It's actually very apropos to my sitting session that I just had. I came across a quote recently by Schopenhauer, the philosopher Schopenhauer, that says, I can do what I will, but who wills what I will? Who is it that actually wills the willing? Is it the I? And so in what you were discussing about the small self trying to negate itself, the process of trying to attain and not attain, rather than perhaps saying to yourself, I know that I am not. Is it possible to instead say to yourself, who is it that is asking this question or making this statement? Who is it that decides to make this decision to try and attain something and that you're told is unattainable, and to explore that instead, which is what I sat on my cushion doing the last half hour.
How'd that work out?
Quite well. It set me back. It actually set me back on something that I started doing decades ago and have avoided returning to because the consequences of asking the question for me at that time were quite unnerving, because I had no idea what Zen was. I had no idea about any of the teachings that go with the Dharma. I was simply doing some exploring of my own consciousness. So I returned to it over and over during the years, and at this point, I have no choice but to really explore it, stick to it, and watch as opposed to think. So,
Yeah. I mean, I always come back to, who is it that's being offended? Or, I was in a situation where the CEO of my company during one of my presentations started looking at his phone, sort of pissed me off. And then the first thing I said to myself is, who is it that's pissed off? And I realized that I was just pissed off because of my ego, because of no reason. But by being pissed off and petty and pissy about it, I was just reaffirming my small self. So I was able to let it go because it really didn't matter. Because that part of me really didn't exist. So anyway, anyone else?
Hey, Chris.
Yeah, yeah. I'm audible, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you said at the beginning that you did this to be more attractive, and I have to say that it worked. Sometimes it takes my wife and one of my kids to hold me back. I'm just trying to literally jump through the Zoom screen at you. If we ever do a calendar, all I ask is that you keep the nudity tasteful. And okay, past that obligatory little joke, uh, I kind of, I wouldn't say give myself a pass, but if I look at all the things in life that you're supposed, that you're kind of expected to do, attainment is the way things work here. You have to go to school or learn something to make money. You have to, get educated, learn to read, get a job. All these things are attainments, and it's no wonder that you would, or anybody would be able to take what is really the direct opposite of however many millions of years of genetic psychology that we all have. Every animal, and we are an animal, is up to the same thing. And it's really hard at the beginning to once you realize that you're really stripping down the car, you're not adding the big tires, you're pulling off the things, kind of uh when you get to that realization, I found that, and it goes for thought too during minute sitting, that if you sort of say to yourself before, whatever thoughts are going to happen are going to happen. I find that I have a lot less, or I get things quiet down a lot sooner, because I've already sort of assumed that I would call it local and global me. The local me is there, but as long as you're not chastising yourself for having an ego, it's never going to go away, because if it does, you won't be able to drive a car, I don't think, or even be in trouble, or handle a conversation or that. I think I've gotten proud too, and I've gone through periods where I've oh, man, I'm handling things pretty well with people, and and then I said, oh, I just congratulated myself, there it is. And that was a good talk. It really it made me remember a lot of that. And great Dharma talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I always find myself dancing in the relative and trying to remember the absolute. Um, we all have goals, you're right? We can't move forward without them. It's just being deluded and consumed with them and thinking
Yeah.
that that's who we are. That's the folly. So,
Yep.
at least for me. And Joanne?
Joanne.
Well, to me, it almost seems like when we talk about realization versus actualization, seems like the moment the CEO looks at the phone and you ask, who's getting aggravated is an actualization, or like enlightenment in or emptiness in form. Because that's like, this is where we live, but when you have something occur amid all your desires to look good in front of the CEO, and not lose your cool when he looks at the phone, but you're still present to, like, that's not the getting pissed off is not the real thing. Isn't that the implementation of kind of enlightenment, like actualization of the realization of enlightenment? That's what it seems like to me, and it doesn't last because it just doesn't. But I think getting to that, it seems to me like getting to that point where you can hold both things is, maybe that's the best we do.
Yeah, because a lot of times I can't get there and I get upset and I think that that's real and this is happening to me. How could he do this to me? How dare he do this to me? And I think about it like, where's me? And that's the touchstone, that grounds me. And then I can let it go. I was like, that's on him. It's nothing to do with me or who I perceive this, thing to be. So, all right.
Yeah, when you say "where's me," are you doing this from an intellectual point of view with regards to the Dharma, are you doing it from an experiential point of view with regards to either past experience or present experience? Because it sounds like it's intellectual.
Yeah. So that's when I took this seminar, it was half intellectual. It was this logical negation of the self that could bring somebody to say, I'm not here. Like saying, you know, first negating your senses and then seeing your thoughts and seeing language and then seeing concepts and breaking it down, letting it go so that you're in a place of intellectual emptiness so that you could have a slight opening so that maybe when you sit you could have a bigger opening and ultimately you're faking it. But sometimes you got to fake it till you make it. So it's not the worst thing in the world because to see your process because we live in that process.
But doesn't this all involve force? Aren't you? Yeah, I mean, when you say you're faking it, you're forcing it. And if you're forcing it, in order to attain, are you going to get there? And if you're just sitting, and let's say you feel like there's a moment of enlightenment about to occur, and you recognize that, where does that enlightenment go? I mean, it doesn't a desire kick in or a fear kick in? Desire of success or fear of failure.
I mean, you have these aha moments, but it's the thinking mind. I think my last statement, thinking about attaining nothing, is actually attaining nothing. It's meaningless. That whole exercise, it can get you to a place, but Zazen gets you to a much deeper place. You could recognize intellectual emptiness, but you're never going to get, let's say, to emptiness beyond emptiness. That's not that place. Only through sitting can you have a more rich or profound experience. That, but I think that there's a purpose served when we get full of ourselves to use our minds to release our small self. I just don't think that it serves much of a purpose for a Zen teacher to put those exercises forth as they're gimmicky to me. That's my opinion. Sandy? You're muted.
Yeah, I unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can.
Okay. When you said that during your talk about you noticed or realized, it's you observed yourself becoming a bit enraged that he would do that to you. That in itself, just the ability to observe that shows that you've had some how do I put it? You have the ability now through your practice to realize when certain emotions come up, where probably when you first started, you just would have had the reaction and there would have been no realization, who's here being enraged and actually being conscious of what was happening within yourself. So in that sense, you've come a long, long way, because now it seems like you're living much more in the now than you probably ever were before, because you now have this ability to observe yourself and observe your reactions to the outside world, and deal with them in a more sane and rational way than just living with the outrage. I don't know if I'm off track, but that's what it seems like to me, that this is what the practice has done for you. It's allowed you to have realizations when your small mind is going berserk and trying to convince you of, feelings that aren't really worth feeling, because now you've had a chance to observe how you react.
Yeah, it's about it gets me about halfway there, because the CEO does call me a surly curmudgeon, um, but that's just because I recognize I'm usually angry at him.
Yeah,
So, but I
but you're
recognize it.
recognizing it.
So, and then I think, well, it's not correct action to be angry, but at least I recognize I'm angry most of the time when I'm around him.
That's right.
So I think I'm about halfway there.
Pema Chodron wrote a whole book about that, about how to incorporate in your practice the realization of your emotions, to be able to observe them and to see where they came from. Did they come from a small mind, or were they in fact something that was actually happening and really real? But that's one thing it seems that most people that I've met seem to be, they attain after many years of practice. Um, you can just see it when you talk to them, and how they interact with others, that they start to realize, oops, their own emotions, um, and be able to observe rather than react.
Yeah, I think for at least me, as I've gotten older, recognizing my emotions and tackling my emotions,
Hmm.
that's really something that's come up in maybe the last 10 years of my life. Um,
Yes.
and most of the time, since I'm now cognizant of my behavior, I feel like a schmuck. So, but at least I recognize how I'm behaving, and once I do that, I think I can change my behaviors. Not that I want to change my behaviors. So it's this
Yeah.
complex maturation process, at least for me as a you know more than middle-aged man. So
Well, maybe in the next 10 years, you'll just be able to let go of it and just keep on going.
yeah,
And it
I
won't, it
think
won't be so painful to go through.
I got to say that the pandemic and COVID helped me not care about a lot of stuff. So
That's right. It lets you see what's really important
yeah,
in life. So, well, thank you. It was a great talk,
thank you.
especially at spur of the moment. So, you know, you didn't get much warning and you came up with something excellent that's helps all of us, I think.
Yeah,
So thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else today?
Come on. Please. Some good questions. Rachel?
Rachel?
Thanks, Spencer, for the talk. And when everyone seems to relate to the CEO looking at the cell phone while you were talking. And I kept thinking, when I was the person, not the CEO, but when I was in the person looking at the cell phone when someone is talking, and the constriction of the small self of being the person doing the presentation, someone not being attentive, and then being the person who's not attentive in the audience, and all of a sudden you realize, you've blanked out on that which you thought you wanted to hear, have you found that as well? You know, that sense of the constriction of the small self when you were the person in the audience looking at your cell phone. I mean, when the roles are reversed like that, have you found a
Yeah.
similar awareness of the restrictions of that, of the small self in that sense?
I feel when I do that and I'm disrespecting someone else, I'm really exercising my small self and asserting my ego. But with the CEO, there were different levels of it because I said, "Who is it that's getting mad?" But my go-to move is sarcasm. So, like, three things came into my head, like, "Oh, is there something interesting? Am I boring you? Do you not understand what I'm trying to convey?" All those things pop into my head, and then I say sarcasm. let that go. But all of those things, whether you're on one side or the other, it's both the same side of the coin, right? They're both the same. So I think it's just bringing yourself back to the moment and just realizing what the next pathway we're going down, and then realizing that moment. So yeah, but what I can say is, like, 10 years ago I might have flew off the handle and said something really stupid, like, because my ego was big, how dare he? But what did it matter now? Because it even matters less to me now, but it to myself, it's just a game.
There was a teacher, I read it in something he wrote, but apparently when he was in that situation talking to himself that way, one question he asked was, "How's it supposed to be?" And I don't like that question either. But thank you, Spencer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer. I learned a lot from your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvin. Sandy, did you have something to?
Yeah. When you were talking about the sarcasm, that I see that the anger and sarcasm, they're all just functions of the mind trying to protect what it perceives as the self. And so those things are not real. They're just another set of delusions. The stuff coming out, the sarcasm, isn't really you. If you really look at it, it's just a protective mechanism. It's a way to not feel hurt by his actions.
Yeah.
Sarcasm usually covers pain.
Yeah. It's been hard for me to let sarcasm go. Not that I'm not sarcastic, but I used to be 100% sarcasm. So for me, letting that go and who I thought I was being sarcastic is hard, because that's who I was, and that's how I built my defense mechanism. So
No, it's still there. It's not like it's not you.
no,
Thoughts are going to be there, but it's the ability to recognize where they come from and what they are and what they mean, what they should or shouldn't mean to you, and letting go. So I think you gave a great talk.
thanks, Sandy.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Oh, and happy Halloween.
Thank you. I won't be staying for service, Peter, but thank you, everyone.
Oh, wait a minute. Before we stop, I'd like to say one thing to Matt. You mentioned earlier about you were asking the question, who is willing? Who is the willing person? And I was going to suggest that you practice with that sitting, because that's not a question you can answer in the thinking mind. It's silence. And if you sit with silence, I think you'll find the understanding of it easier than trying to work it out. So I just wanted to mention that is a good sitting question.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody.